Hi, I'm Colden. I used to think the worst betrayal was silence, but then my brother assaulted my fiancée at our cousin's wedding. And when I told my parents, they didn't cry. They smiled. They called her unstable, said she was asking for it, told me to be a man, to let it go. I didn't. And when the truth finally came out, it wasn't him begging for forgiveness. It was them. But what they did next made me realize this wasn't just about family anymore. What would you have done if your name, your blood, your whole life was built on a lie? The day started like one of those South Carolina afternoons that seem made for weddings. Heavy sunlight, too much perfume, the sound of laughter that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Maris and I drove up to the Charleston Vineyard together, the car quiet except for the GPS voice telling us where to turn. She hummed softly, trying to fill the space between us. I squeezed her hand once, just to say I was fine. I wasn't. This was the first big family event since my promotion. The kind of thing where, in theory, everyone's proud of you. But in my family, praise had always been a resource doled out to my brother Darren. He was the golden boy, smooth, charming, reckless in all the ways that somehow made people forgive him. I was the careful one, the responsible one, the invisible one. When we arrived, my mother's face lit up, not for me, but for her son's fiancée walking in behind us. "Colden," she said, giving me a distracted hug. Then, with a sharper tone, "You two sit anywhere near the front. Darren saved us a table." It took me a second to notice that she didn't say you both, just you two, like we were guests, not family. Inside, the music was warm and familiar. Motown, the kind everyone in my family danced to like they were auditioning for a time they no longer lived in. Darren was everywhere, pouring champagne, telling jokes, kissing cheeks. He slapped my back and grinned. "Man, you made it. I told Mom you'd probably bail again." "I never bail," I said, forcing a smile. He laughed like he'd won something. "Sure you don't." Dinner came and went in a blur of toasts, laughter, and polite smiles. My cousin raised her glass to thank everyone for coming. My father followed, talking about family unity, about how proud he was to see his sons together. My name never came up, not once. When the microphone passed from hand to hand, it skipped right over me, as if someone had quietly decided I didn't belong in the rotation. I laughed it off, or tried to. Maris reached under the table and touched my arm, a quiet question in her eyes. I shrugged. "It's fine," I whispered. "It's just how they are." But I felt it, the familiar burn that crawls up your throat when you've been forgotten on purpose. After dinner, the dance floor filled with the usual chaos of uncles half drunk on bourbon and cousins taking selfies. Darren grabbed Maris by the wrist, pulling her into a dance. At first, it was light, harmless. Then his hand slipped lower than it should have, his laugh too close to her ear. She laughed too, but it wasn't joy. It was politeness. That nervous sound women make when they know saying "stop" will cause a scene. I watched, jaw tight, pretending to sip my drink. My father caught my eye from across the room, gave a small shake of the head. "Don't ruin this." That's what his look said. When the song ended, Darren hugged her. One of those hugs that lasts a heartbeat too long. He said something against her hair, something that made her eyes flick to me, quick and apologetic. She came back to our table, cheeks flushed. "He's just drunk," she murmured. I nodded, even though I'd said those same words 100 times in my life. "Yeah," I said softly. "He's always drunk." But it wasn't about alcohol. It was about entitlement. a kind of permission my brother had been handed at birth. As the night dragged on, I made small talk, smiled when I was supposed to, even joined a photo where Darren threw his arm around me like we'd never argued. The photographer said, "Brothers, perfect." All I could think was, one of us is pretending. When Maris and I finally left, the air outside felt heavier than it should have. She walked ahead, quiet, her heels crunching on the gravel path. I lingered by the car, looking back through the glass windows of the hall. My family was still inside, laughing, clinking glasses, like the night had gone perfectly. I felt the weight of that silence, the kind that tells you, again, you're on the outside looking in. Driving home, Maris leaned against the window, pretending to sleep. I glanced at her hand in her lap, still tense. There was a faint smudge of Darren's cologne on her sleeve. I could smell it. For the first time in a long while, I didn't push the thought away. I just let it sit there. When we got home, I checked my phone. The family group chat was still buzzing from the night. Photos, emojis, inside jokes. I scrolled looking for my name. It wasn't there. I set my phone face down on the counter, but the screen kept lighting up. Photos kept coming in, clinking glasses, Darren grinning beside our cousin, my parents with arms draped over newlyweds, Darren again, mid-toast, same group chat, different day, same ghosting. Maris walked into the kitchen in her robe, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I had already been up for a while, the coffee brewed, the toast untouched. My hand hovered near the mug, but my stomach didn't want it. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing the stiff way I stood, the fake calm on my face. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "Just catching up. Deleted some apps last night, trying to detox a little." I forced a small grin. "Social media's like sugar. Too much of it rots you." She smiled back, but her eyes lingered on me a second longer than usual. She knew something was off. I picked up my phone again after she left to shower. That's when I saw it. A photo of Darren and my dad at a steakhouse downtown. Captions, "Planning Thursday's thank you dinner." Clapping emojis. More inside jokes. I scrolled down. "We'll confirm the reservation for 10. Someone wrote. 10. There was no message to me, not even a hope you can make it. I stared at that number. 10. It echoed louder than silence. 10 seats. 10 names. I wasn't one of them. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't move. If you have to ask to be invited, you're already not wanted. The doorbell rang. A delivery. Maris accepted it and brought it in. A small box of custom wine glasses. "From the family," she said, reading the tag. "To the wedding crew." Her name was on the label. Mine wasn't. We both stood there in the living room, the air still thick with morning heat and something else. Something sticky. Later that afternoon, while I was folding laundry on the couch, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Hey, sweetheart," she started with a brightness that felt forced. "Heard you saw the messages. Darren told me." I kept my voice flat. "Yeah, I saw them." "Well, I know it looked like you were left out, but everyone's just been busy organizing. You should still come, though. Family means showing up, even when it's messy." "Messy? That's what she called it?" Maris sat quietly beside me, folding a towel, pretending not to listen. But I felt the shift in her body. A pause. A breath held too long. I exhaled slowly. "Sure, I'll come, if it helps." "Good," Mom said, already distracted. "Wear something nice. You know how photos end up framed." She hung up. Maris placed her hand on my knee. "I think it's good you're going," she said gently. "Maybe it's not personal." They made a group without me. Sometimes people do thoughtless things without realizing the impact. I looked at her. You really believe that? She hesitated. I want to. We didn't say anything else that night. Thursday came. Charleston was thick with the kind of summer heat that makes you reconsider dinner plans, but I put on a collared shirt, shaved, even wore the watch Maris gave me last Christmas. We drove downtown in silence. The restaurant was one of those places with dim lighting and leather chairs that swallowed your back. When we walked in, I saw them already seated at a long mahogany table, laughter bouncing off glasses. No one had saved us a seat. Maris squeezed my hand. I found 2 chairs near the kitchen door, half a room away from the center where Darren and his girlfriend sat holding court. I could feel the draft every time a waiter pushed through the swinging door behind us. No one even looked up. The conversation flowed like we hadn't walked in. I poured water for Maris. No one else noticed we were there. Halfway through appetizers, Darren stood with his wine glass, tapping it with his fork. To family, he announced. To pulling off a perfect wedding and still liking each other after. Laughter followed, easy and wide. He looked right at my dad. Thanks for keeping me sane. You always knew how to calm the chaos. Mom dabbed her eye. Someone clapped. I sat still, holding my untouched glass. I finally raised it, a half-beat late, and sipped. It was still half full when everyone else had drained theirs. Then Dad leaned over and with a chuckle said, You were always the quiet one, Colden. We love that about you. I smiled. But inside, it landed like a dull thud. They didn't love my quiet. They relied on it. It gave them permission to never change. It wasn't affection. It was convenience. I glanced toward the end of the table. One chair remained unclaimed, draped in a jacket that didn't belong to anyone. Just sitting there, empty. Waiting for someone who hadn't shown up. Or maybe someone who was never invited. On the drive home, Maris broke the silence first. They didn't see you, she said softly, eyes forward. I kept mine on the road. They never do. The streetlights blinked past us one by one. And for once I wasn't angry. Just tired. Tired in the kind of way that makes you question what you're holding on to. The streetlights faded behind us as we pulled into the hotel parking lot that night. The reception had moved from the vineyard to the downtown ballroom, a final round of champagne and congratulations before everyone went their separate ways. I hadn't wanted to go, but Maris had said, Let's just close the weekend right. No bad blood. Inside, the music pulsed soft and low, the kind of rhythm meant to keep people lingering. The air smelled of perfume and spilled wine. Couples danced lazily under dimmed chandeliers. For a brief moment, I felt almost normal again. Maris laughed at something one of my cousins said, that warm laugh I hadn't heard since before all of this. Then Darren appeared. His tie was gone, shirt half unbuttoned, drink sloshing in his hand. Well, look at you two, he drawled, eyes drifting toward Maris. That dress. Wow, you're really making the family look good tonight. I stepped forward, smiling in that polite way Southern men are taught to when they'd rather throw a punch. She always does. He grinned, slow and smug. Lucky man. Behind him, his wife rolled her eyes. Ignore him. He's harmless when he's drunk, she said with the casualness of someone used to cleaning up his messes. Maris forced a small smile and turned to me. I'm going to the restroom, she said softly. I nodded. I walked to the bar for a refill, then remembered the ice machine near the hall. My throat was dry. I figured the walk would give me a minute to breathe. The hallway was long and quiet, lined with faded floral carpet. I filled the bucket halfway before I heard something. A muffled sound, half gasp, half whisper, then silence. "Maris?" I called, setting the ice bucket down. No answer. I turned the corner. The light from a wall sconce flickered once. She was there, frozen mid-step, her hair tangled, lipstick smeared across her chin. Her eyes were wide, not with fear exactly, but with disbelief. She looked at me like she was trying to process what had just happened. "He cornered me," she whispered. Then Darren stumbled out from the doorway behind her, one hand fumbling with his zipper. His grin was crooked. "Oh, come on," he slurred. "She led me on. She was smiling all night." The sound that came out of me wasn't a word. I don't remember deciding to move, just the feeling of my knuckles connecting with his face. A dull crack. The kind of sound you don't forget. He hit the wall and slid down, stunned. Someone screamed. The door to the ballroom burst open, music spilling into the hallway. Guests crowded around, phones out, whispering. "Stop!" Maris cried, pulling at my arm. "Colden, stop!" Security rushed in, separating us. Darren was bleeding from the lip, swearing he didn't remember anything. "Drunk blackout," he muttered as they helped him up. She misunderstood. I stood there, chest heaving, my fist still shaking. Maris clung to me, trembling. They took us to a small office near the lobby. My parents arrived minutes later. My father's first words weren't to me. They were to the manager. "There's no need to involve the police. We'll handle this privately." Maris flinched. "He tried to—" My mother interrupted, her tone sharp. "Sweetheart, Darren's not like that. He'd never— well, maybe he got confused. These weddings can get wild." I turned on her. "Confused? You think she imagined this?" Dad leaned forward, voice low. "You'll regret pushing this, son. Families handle things quietly. No one wins if it goes public." That's when I realized this wasn't shock. It was instinct. A practiced defense. This wasn't the first time they'd cleaned up for him. Maris's hands were shaking so badly she dropped her ring as she reached for a tissue. It rolled across the tile, stopping near my shoe. I bent to pick it up. For a second, I thought about slipping it back onto her finger, but something in her eyes told me not to. Not yet. We walked out of that office together, silent, the sound of our footsteps echoing down the hall. The laughter from the ballroom had faded. All that was left was the faint hum of a vacuum somewhere in the distance. Back in our room, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "He said I was smiling," she whispered. I wasn't. I placed the ring on the nightstand beside her. "I know." Neither of us spoke after that. The weight of what had happened pressed into the walls, into the space between us. I could feel her slipping further away, not from me, but from everything she thought she knew about family, about safety. I looked down at the ring one last time before turning off the light. That small circle of gold caught the lamp's reflection like an eye refusing to close. We didn't sleep much that night. Maris lay curled toward the window, her shoulders stiff, her eyes open but unfocused. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, replaying everything: his face, her voice, the silence in that hotel hallway. By morning, the sun was already beating down through the thin curtains of our room, bright and indifferent. A text buzzed through from my mother. "We're all meeting at the house, 10 a.m., just to talk. Love you." No question mark, no space for refusal. We drove in silence. The Raymer house stood tall under a canopy of oak trees, porch swings creaking faintly in the wind. From the outside, it looked like a page out of Southern living: fresh paint, brick pillars, flowers hanging from the railing. You'd never guess the rot under all that charm. Inside, the air smelled of lemon polish and control. Darren was already there, sitting in the formal living room like some wounded guest of honor. His cheek was swollen, lip split, but he looked smug underneath it all. He barely glanced at us when we walked in. Mother gestured toward the seating area. "Come sit, please. Let's not drag this out." Dad stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. "This doesn't need to become bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. I glanced at Maris. She nodded once, barely, and sat beside me on the edge of the tufted couch like she didn't want to touch it. Darren cleared his throat. "Look, I don't remember everything. I had too much. Maybe I got too close, but I swear, I didn't mean anything." Mother's voice was syrupy. "He was drunk, Colden. You know your brother." There it was. That sentence. That curse wrapped in linen. Maris leaned forward. Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. "He waited for me outside the restroom. He grabbed my arm. I told him to stop." She paused, swallowing hard. "He didn't. She didn't cry. Not then." Mom gave a soft laugh, like she was brushing dust off the coffee table. "Sweetheart, maybe there was a misunderstanding. You laughed at one of his jokes during dinner. Darren said you were being kind. Maybe he misread that." I stared at her. "You're saying this is her fault?" No, she replied quickly. "But sometimes people see things differently, and we have to consider everyone's feelings." Everyone's, except hers. Dad stepped in. "Let's all calm down. This family doesn't solve problems with shouting or courtrooms." He looked at me pointedly. "There's no good in dragging our name through the mud over something that..." "That what?" I cut in. "Something that didn't happen? Something we should pretend didn't?" He walked closer, voice quiet. "We're asking you to think carefully. You file something official, it becomes permanent, public, irreversible." I didn't speak. Maris stood slowly. "I can't," she started, her breath caught. She pressed her lips together and walked out of the room without another word. I watched her go, then turned back toward the others. "You're asking me to protect someone who broke her." Dad didn't hesitate. "We're asking you to protect your family." That line sat heavy in the air. Not protect her, not protect the truth, protect the family. I looked down at my hands, fists again, just like the night before, only colder. I opened them slowly. Across the room, at the far end of the long dining table, there was a chair. Empty. The same one I used to sit in at Sunday dinners when I was too young to speak, but old enough to know when not to. That chair was always mine, except when it wasn't. I hadn't noticed it until now. It looked smaller than I remembered. I stood up. No one stopped me. I think they assumed I needed a minute, or that I'd come around once I got some air. I didn't say goodbye. Outside, the sun had climbed high. Charleston heat settled heavy on my shoulders like a warning. I found Maris standing near the car, staring at the driveway gravel like it had answers. "I thought it would be different," she said, voice soft. "I thought if we told the truth, they'd have to listen." I opened the passenger door for her, waited until she was inside, then walked around and got in. We didn't speak the whole way back. But in my chest, something had shifted, not snapped, not broken, just cracked, clean and permanent. I didn't tell Maris when I started watching the footage. It became something I did at night, when she'd finally drift off on the couch, still in the same clothes from the day before. I'd cover her with the throw blanket, then walk quietly into my office, shutting the door until only the soft tick of the clock and the hum of the laptop filled the room. 2 weeks had passed since the family meeting. I hadn't spoken to any of them, not once. That evening, rain tapped against the windows like it had something to say but couldn't quite say it. I sat with a half glass of whiskey, lamp on low, fingers hesitating over the mouse pad. I pressed play again. The hotel security clip started like always. Wide shot of the bar, slow pan across laughing guests. Maris in a soft blue dress, glass in hand. Darren too close, leaning in. She moved slightly away, smiled out of habit, not warmth. Then the part that turned my stomach. He turned as she walked toward the back hallway, followed without hesitation. The screen blinked. Static. I rewound. Same thing. The footage cut out just before they disappeared around the corner. That hall had a second camera. I'd asked the hotel manager specifically. You'll get both angles, he'd promised. But now, this version, it ended early, conveniently corrupted. That wasn't an accident. Someone had tampered with it, edited it, sent me a version cleaned up for damage control. I leaned back, the leather chair creaking beneath me. I wasn't surprised, just confirmed. They were still cleaning up after him. They always had. This was just a more expensive mop. Behind me, the door creaked slightly. Maris didn't say anything. She just stood in the hallway for a moment, then turned away. Later, when I came out to check on her, she was sitting at the kitchen island, a cold cup of tea untouched. The ring was gone from her hand. She didn't look up. "Maybe we should let it go," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but something about it tore through me sharper than anything my father had said. Maybe it's just too much to fight. She flinched when her phone lit up, just a spam call, but her reaction was reflex now, like her nerves had been rewired to expect disappointment. I nodded once, didn't argue, didn't push, just turned away and walked back into the office. I sat down again and opened my email, drafted a message to my father. "If you keep this buried, I'll unearth everything, not just this." I hovered over the send button. I didn't click it. Instead, I saved it in drafts, like I had the night before, like I would tomorrow. Writing it was enough for now. A boundary, a warning. I didn't need them to hear it yet. I just needed to know it existed. The next day, late evening, I heard the knock on the glass door. 3 quick taps, too familiar. It was Darren. I opened the door slowly, not stepping aside. He smiled like we were boys again, like the past was something you could smooth over with small talk and the right tone. "Hey," he said, stepping in anyway. "I figured we should talk. You know, before this gets worse." He looked around the office like he was casing it, eyes landing on the ring box I'd left on the shelf by accident. "I told you, man. We were drunk idiots." She laughed at my joke. Didn't think it meant anything. "I get it now. It was a mistake." His words were smooth, but his tone had an edge, like someone offering an apology and a warning in the same breath. "You don't get to decide what she meant," I said, voice even. He raised his eyebrows. "Look, I'm not here to fight. I just don't want this to ruin both our lives." I stepped closer, not raising my voice. "You already ruined one." His smile wavered. Then it returned, thinner, colder. "You always take things too seriously. Some things should be." There was a long pause. He gave a nod, almost respectful, then turned and walked out. I stood still until I heard his car start and drive away. That night, back in the kitchen, Maris placed the ring on the counter without a word. I watched her fingers linger on it for a second, then pull away. I didn't ask. When she left the room, I picked it up gently, turned it over in my hand, then walked to the study. I opened the small wooden box I kept my mother's old letters in, set the ring inside, and locked it shut. Whatever that ring had once symbolized, love, promise, permanence, it didn't anymore. Now it sat beside old apologies and fading ink. Something had shifted, not loud, not dramatic, but permanent. The file landed in my inbox on a Thursday morning. No sender, no subject, just an attachment labeled FYI. I clicked it, still half asleep, sipping lukewarm coffee at my desk at the firm. By the time I reached the third page, my stomach turned. It was a financial report, part real, part twisted. Out-of-context expense records, inflated vendor quotes, cherry-picked emails from 3 years ago when we were under a tight audit. Enough to look suspicious to someone who didn't know better. Enough to look damaging to someone who did. And then came the headline in the Charleston Herald just hours later. City project finalist faces internal scrutiny. That was no coincidence. I didn't need a trail of fingerprints to know where it came from. The only people who had access to both the numbers and the press were either working for me or working against me. And in Charleston, there's no clearer division than blood. By noon, our phones wouldn't stop ringing, clients hesitant, the city council requesting clarification, my junior partners offering apologies they didn't owe. I kept my face still, my voice even, told everyone to stay calm, that it would blow over. Inside, I was calculating. That evening, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, straightening my black tie. Maris, silent since breakfast, watched me from the bed, legs curled under her. She hadn't asked if I'd still attend the gala. She didn't need to. The Raymer Foundation's annual charity gala. Our family's favorite display of virtue. My father shaking hands under chandeliers, my mother smiling through champagne flutes, Darren bragging about whatever he hadn't actually built, and me? Historically, I kept to the far end of the ballroom, sipping club soda and avoiding spotlights. But not tonight. By the time I arrived, the marble lobby was already packed. Laughter bounced off gold-framed paintings. Waiters carried trays like choreography. I nodded politely, weaving through handshakes and half-hearted compliments. Darren spotted me first. He made his way over with that signature smirk, clasped my shoulder like we were long-lost teammates. "Glad you came," he said, leaning in. "Heard things are rough at the firm. Tough break, huh?" Then louder for the people nearby. "But you know Colden. He always bounces back. Just needs a little space." I smiled thinly. "Don't waste your breath pretending to care." He shrugged and disappeared into the crowd. That had always been his tactic. Do the damage, then play oblivious. Near the stage, I found my parents surrounded by city officials and local donors. My father's voice rang clear as ever. Firm, rehearsed. My mother laughed on cue. When I finally approached, my father's eyes barely flicked toward me. "We're hosting guests, Colden," he said without turning. "Save the scowl for Monday morning." I didn't move. "Did you leak the file?" He took a sip of his drink. "You're upset. I get it. But you're hurting your mother with all this drama. Be a man. Move on." That phrase, "be a man," as if integrity were weakness, as if silence were strength. I walked out without another word, past the velvet ropes, and into the humid night. The air outside felt thick, like the world was holding its breath. I stood there beneath the spotlighted banner, the Raymer Foundation Building Integrity. Since 1973, I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just stared at it. The name, the lie. Then a voice came from behind me. Colden. I turned. It was Helen Kim, a former junior accountant at the Raymer firm. She left a few years back. No drama, just moving on. Or so I thought. You didn't hear this from me, she said quietly, stepping closer. But your dad's office wired money to the hotel's third-party contractor the day after the wedding. The same account that handles staff bonuses. Look at the ledger. There's your footage. I blinked. You're sure? She nodded. I saw the transfer myself. You want proof? Ask for the backup archive. It's not fully erased, just buried. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel helpless. I felt certain. Inside, the event rolled on. Speeches, polite applause, strategic laughter. I re-entered the hall, walking slowly, scanning the tables. And there it was, at the end of the head table, the empty chair. The same one I used to be assigned as a kid. Always the edge. Always close enough to be seen, never quite included. This time, I didn't sit in it. I walked up to it, pulled it out gently, turned it around to face the stage, and left it that way. People noticed. Conversations paused. A few phones lifted. I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. Then I turned and walked out. That chair, empty and facing the stage, would be in every photo from the night. A quiet protest. A statement louder than any microphone. I didn't need their approval anymore. And for the first time, I saw it clearly. They weren't just protecting Darren. They were protecting themselves. The night after the gala, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my home office with the lamp dimmed low, the cursor blinking on a blank email draft. The rain returned, tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm, like a clock ticking down. I wasn't waiting for rage. That had passed. This was something quieter, something colder. It took 3 phone calls, 2 favors, and 1 quietly threatened NDA to access the records. Bank transfers. Line by line, I read them. 2 days after the wedding, a payment from Raymer Development to a shell firm registered to the hotel's parent company. Memo line, Emergency Facilities Maintenance. It wasn't subtle. It was clean. Too clean. I stared at the timestamp, 3:14 p.m. The exact afternoon Maris had sat on our hotel bed, hands trembling, whispering what Darren did in that hallway. They'd paid to erase it. No metaphor. No theory. It was real. It didn't even sting this time. It just clarified. Late the next morning, I drove out to the edge of town. Maris had been staying in a small rental house near the lake. Quiet, safe. She said the water helped her sleep, or try to. I found her on the back porch with a mug of tea pressed to her chest. She was thinner, paler, but not brittle. Not anymore. I didn't speak right away, just held out the folder. She didn't ask what it was. She opened it slowly, scanning every page without blinking. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "They sold your soul to protect his image." I nodded, easing down onto the step beside her. "No," I said. "They sold all of ours." She set the papers down. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was aligned. We weren't a couple now. We were something more honest than that. Survivors of the same storm. After a long pause, she stood, went inside, and came back with a small silver flash drive. "I didn't tell you," she said quietly. I didn't even know if it mattered anymore. She handed it to me. "It's audio, the hotel's security chief. He called me after the wedding. Said he was sorry. Said he tried to push back, but the pressure was too much. I recorded it. I plugged it into my laptop. The audio was grainy, but the words came through clearly. I shouldn't be saying this, miss, but your fiancé's family, the Ramers, they paid well to keep their name clean. I had no choice. Orders from upstairs. I'm sorry. I sat back. For the first time, I had something real. Not assumptions, not suspicion, proof. When I looked up, she was watching me, and I noticed it. The ring. Not on her left hand, not where it used to sit. It was looped onto a chain around her neck, not a promise, a reminder. Later that afternoon, I texted Darren to meet me at Carter's Cafe by the lake. Neutral ground. Public enough to keep things civil. Quiet enough to end whatever needed ending. He showed up in a pressed polo, sunglasses tucked in his collar like some retired frat boy. He even smiled. "Didn't think you'd want to see me again," he said, sliding into the booth. I didn't return it. Just reached into my coat pocket and set my phone on the table. Hit play. His face went slack as the voice poured from the speaker. "The Ramers pay well to keep their name clean." He didn't even finish listening. He reached for his coffee, knocked it over instead. Liquid spilled across the table, dripping to the floor. "You recorded me?" "That's not your voice." He stared at me. I leaned forward. "You thought I'd keep your secret." "You were right, until you made me theirs too." He didn't answer, just stood, fast, left his phone behind in the rush. I picked it up, wrapped it in a napkin, and tucked it into my jacket. Later that night, back in my office, I opened a new email, addressed it to an investigative journalist I'd followed for years, someone who made a career exposing polished Southern lies. I attached the audio, the bank records, and a photo of Darren's abandoned phone, time-stamped and geotagged. But I didn't send it. Not yet. I left it there, open, so that when the Ramers finally looked, they'd know it was coming. This time, I wasn't the one flinching in silence. I was the one holding it. I arrived at the estate just after 4. The sun dipped behind the oaks like it was watching from a safe distance, too proud to cast its light on what was about to unfold. They called it a board meeting, but I knew better. It was a performance. Every Raymer cousin and distant shareholder who could dial in from a yacht or a second home was present. In person or by screen, they came, not out of loyalty, but curiosity. They sensed something was shifting, even if they didn't know what. My father greeted me first, arms open, voice syrupy. "My sensible son," he said too loudly, glancing toward the cameras set up in the corners. "Come in. Let's show them we're still one family." I didn't return the hug, just nodded, stepped inside, and took my seat. Not at the head, not yet, but where I'd always been placed. Down the line, between silence and shadow. My mother wore pearls. Not the heirloom kind, the performative kind. Her smile was stiff. It cracked when she saw the look in my eyes, but she held it. She always did. Darren arrived last, of course, with his blazer unbuttoned and a tumbler of something dark in his hand. He stood behind his chair, lifted his glass like a man accepting an award he didn't earn. "To forgiveness," he said, "and family loyalty." That's when I stood. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look around for permission. I slid a tablet across the long mahogany table and tapped play. The voice filled the room, low, apologetic, undeniable. "The Ramers pay well to keep their name clean." No soundtrack could have hit harder. Gasps. One of the screens flickered as someone on the call tried to mute themselves. Mother's glass hit the table with a soft chime, and Darren froze mid-sip. My father moved like a man who just realized his house had termites. He reached for the tablet. "Touch it," I said, "and I'll forward everything to the Tribune." He hesitated. The whole room did. I'm bluffing, huh? I said, eyes on Darren. Then call it. Silence fell so thick it made the air feel denser. I walked to the end of the table. There, the chair, the same damn chair they'd always kept empty at these meetings, like a symbol of unity or absence. This time, I pulled it out and sat. No one told me I couldn't. A few moments passed before a soft creak came from the back of the room. The door opened and Maris stepped in. She wasn't dressed for vengeance. She wore a simple blouse, no makeup, just clarity. She stood tall, glanced around, then let her eyes settle on Darren. You remember this room? She asked, quiet but sharp. I do. He couldn't answer, couldn't even lift his eyes. His hands trembled finally, not from guilt, but exposure. The press release hit 37 minutes later. My phone buzzed on the table as headlines went live. Whistleblower exposes cover-up in Raymer Foundation. Emails came in. Donors pulling out. Media. Requests flooding in. A lawyer from the board asking for my version before the story spiraled further. Within the hour, Darren was suspended from all company dealings pending an internal investigation. By nightfall, my father released a statement citing declining health as the reason for stepping down. The empire didn't crumble with a bang. It cracked. Quietly. Efficiently. Like marble under pressure. As the sun sank behind the trees for the second time that day, I walked past the dining room. There, in its usual place, the empty chair was gone. In its place, a hollow space. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the ring, the one I once thought would start a future. I set it gently on the table where the chair used to be, a gravestone, not for Maris, not for the man Darren broke her to prove he was, but for the version of me that stayed silent. And maybe for all the sons who were told to be quiet, to be good, to be loyal. Because now they would learn what silence really sounded like. The morning air along Charleston Harbor held the kind of stillness that doesn't beg to be broken. Just a faint hush of waves tapping the dock, the quiet clink of sailboats resting in their slips. I stood with a paper cup warming my hand, coffee long gone cold, watching gulls hover and dip. It had been 6 months since the fallout, 6 months since I pulled back the curtain and let daylight pour over every lie that built my family's name. The Raymer Foundation dissolved before the ink dried on the last headline. My parents' estate was sold in a private listing. Some of the antique furniture ended up on auction sites, others in the hands of collectors who didn't care about the stories behind them. Just the wood, the brass, the price. I saw a photo once, one of our old dining chairs sitting in a warehouse catalog. Same curved legs, same velvet cushion, stripped of everything else. Like memory itself had been put up for bid. Darren didn't fight the charges. The plea deal kept it quiet, contained. He served his time like a man who'd grown up knowing what cages were. Not physical ones, but expectations wrapped in silk and legacy. His name stopped showing up in the papers after the 3rd week. Charleston moved on faster than I did. My father's heart gave out for real this time. No performance, no angle, just a man outlived by the weight of what he built. I went to the funeral, not for him, really, but because I needed to see the grave. I needed to stand beside it, feel the finality. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just looked at the headstone and thought, you taught me silence. I just learned how to use it better. Maris didn't come. She had moved to Atlanta, started working with a nonprofit helping women navigate the impossible. She sent postcards sometimes, nothing poetic, just names of cities and bits of scenery. Once she wrote, "The air in Denver is dry, but the sky is wider than I remembered. I hope you're still breathing deep." The ring, her ring, still sat in the wooden box on my shelf. The key? I'd thrown it in the harbor weeks ago. The box didn't need opening anymore. It wasn't about what was inside. It was about what it used to mean. I started something new. Quiet, deliberate, RMR design. Reclaim, mend, rise. Nobody knew what the initials meant but me. That was enough. Our first project was a shelter renovation on the north end, a building forgotten by time and funding, walls cracked, windows drafty. I didn't design it to win awards. I designed it to hold stories safely. The opening ceremony was modest: folding chairs, donated pastries, a few city reps nodding for photos. I was meant to say a few words, something about architecture and dignity. As I walked toward the podium, I noticed an extra chair, placed by accident, sitting slightly off-center. No one else seemed to care. But I saw it. That chair had followed me in different forms: a symbol, a weight, a wound. This time, it was just space, an invitation. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a single white rose, the kind that used to line the garden path at the estate, and placed it gently on the seat. Then I looked out at the modest crowd and said, "Silence protects no one, but used right, it can build a place for others to speak." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was respectful, earned, quiet enough to let the meaning settle in. After, I stepped outside, the wind catching my collar, tugging at my sleeves like a child asking to be noticed. The water shimmered, catching sky in fragments. I leaned on the railing and looked down, not to escape, not to reflect, just to see what was there. And in that shifting glass, I didn't see the forgotten son, not the obedient one, not the outsider, just a man who chose truth over belonging, who learned that justice rarely comes clean or easy, and sometimes it arrives long after the wound has healed over. Forgiveness isn't letting them off the hook. It's finally taking myself off theirs.